approach Thanksgiving and we have the coveting commandments, God lined these two up, and I want to work on them together. And I want to talk about how gratitude and thanksgiving are antithetical to coveting. So here's the commandment we had today. And again, I don't care if you make one big one or two little ones. I'm good either way. But we're not going to covet. So the question is, how? How do I not covet when desire is hardwired into human beings? We look, we compare, we contrast. That's what we do. That's human. We can argue whether it was before or after the fall. I don't know. But this is what we do. Somebody shows up with something and we go, ooh, I like that. Or, ooh, how are they doing so well? Like I said, my friend John Berger, born and raised on a farm in Nebraska, and literally, he said, oh, this is what we did every Sunday afternoon. After church, we would all get in my dad's pickup truck or the car if mom was coming, and we would drive around and we'd look at all the neighbors' crops. And it wasn't like, oh, I'm envious, Bob's going to have a great harvest, but it was, what's Bob doing? And then down at the co-op, you go, hey, Bob, it looks like your corn's looking really good. Or, hey, Willie, your soybeans are looking great. What are you doing this year? Well, I'm trying such and such. I talked to the county agent, and he said, and that was how everybody got better. Desire is part of who we are. So how do you not covet when it's wired into us? It is, here's my definition of it, an inordinate and envious desire to have what belongs to another. So in other words, you want it really, really bad. And my addendum to it as a born American capitalist is it is wrong to desire without working for it. Okay? So it's one thing to say, ooh, nice truck. I will now save my money and work hard and get my own truck. Nothing wrong with that. What would be wrong was, how do I get my neighbor's truck? And if you get to my age, you go, the most important thing is not having my own truck, but knowing somebody who's got a truck. That you're a good enough friend with it, you can say, can I borrow your truck? And normally they'll look at me and go, I'm not going to trust you with my truck, but I'll drive. And then you have a second set of hands. It's perfect. By the way, we had another young guest this morning. God, for some reason, listens to prayers when we asked to be an intergenerational church. Jack's brought his sister, Charlotte. On the way out, Charlotte, we were doing the handshake thing, and Jack's like, thank you, Pastor, thank you, Pastor, thank you, Pastor. Charlotte comes up and goes, you're actually a little funny. Thank you, Charlotte. Okay, so my addendum is pro-capital, let's work for a living. Paul has a spiritual insight. That's the difference between St. Paul and Pastor John. Here's what Paul's spiritual insight is. Put to death whatever belongs to your earthly nature: sexual immorality, impurity, lust, evil, desires, and greed, which he calls idolatry. So let's just go over those words. We'll do a little Greek study, very short. Desires, epithymai, or thymia. I don't care, because I can't pronounce Greek. I can read it barely. So there's places where desire is absolutely appropriate. Adam desired Eve. I desire my wife. I desire whatever it is. That drives human beings. That's who we are. So when you use it in its proper channel, it is a good thing. Desire, longing. I long to go home, which, by the way, this week, my mom had 2 different falls this week. It's all right. And now the good news is, so this is practicing gratitude, right? I can either spend all my time going, oh my God, my mom fell, my mom fell, my mom fell. Or I can say, thank God, because my brother and sister were Johnny on the spot, and when they took her into the doctor after the emergency room visit, they had primed the doctor to say, were you alone in the house when this happened? Well, yes, I was. And they said, you have a choice now. You can either go to assisted living or you have to have help in 7 days a week. And my mom said, 7 days a week, 7 days a week. So instead of 3 days a week and everything else falling on relatives, we now have 7 days a week help coming in. Thank you, Jesus. I can safely say that because my mother watches worship. She does not watch Sunday school. It is possible to desire appropriately. My mom desires to go home. She did not want to turn 100. She wants to go see Jesus, see my dad again. She wants to go home. She's going to live while she's not going to take her own life. That belongs to God. But she's like, I'm ready anytime. When I saw my brother come up on caller ID, I went, ooh, maybe, So now, there is, however, in our lives, in the Bible, context where the object of our desire is immoral or it's sinful. That's covetous, craving, lusting. Same Greek word, different translations based on context. So if a person's desire is evil towards something that's not right, it's evil, it's lust, it's coveting. If it's a positive place, that's legitimate. And then the second word, greed, and that just means avarice. This is I will never have enough. So when the Bible says be content, the avarice person says I can't. There will never be enough. And you get to that point where I don't know about you, but there's times where you're going. Harold told a story for me that I love. He was their softball team was playing, and evidently there are grades of bats in softball. Right up here. Linda will move her purse.
Thank you.
And their team was, like the 80-plus team. So they're not as strong as they used to be. And somebody was going, man, if only we had a better bat. And somebody was like, yeah, but those bats cost like $750. Who knew? Okay. And one guy says, yeah, me either. Okay. I only know because Harold told me the story. And one guy took Harold aside. Harold's the equipment manager and said, go buy the bat. I'll pay for it. And Harold's like, that's a lot of money. And I've got more money than I've got life left. That's a sign of contentment. That just says, really, spend the money on the bat because I can't take it with me. We might as well enjoy it. So that's the opposite of avarice. That's contentment. Okay? So Paul's spiritual insight continued. For Paul, coveting reflects the idolatrous thought, we're smarter than God. Why did you give to them what you should have given to me? If you may remember, this is what tripped Adam and Eve up when the snake said, don't you want to be as wise as God? I'm paraphrasing. And they went, oh, yeah, don't I want that? Okay? Same basic treatment. So, covetousness reveals that we think, God, you're holding out on me. You did not give me what's appropriate. You gave it to somebody else. And you should have given it to me, in addition to everything else I already have. And we can see this with money, easily. We can see this with, we can see this with objects. How come they have such a nice house? Or, I think in this room we might many of us remember, anybody else remember the movie Amadeus? Okay, that was covetousness on behalf of Scagliari, right? Why, me, godly guy, did you not give as much musical talent as you gave to this reprobate Mozart? God, this is wrong. Okay? So that's what happens when pastors watch movies. We spend our time going, is there a sermon illustration there? But, okay, so this is saying, God, you just got the distribution wrong. I should have got that. So you made a mistake in distributing your gifts. You were too stupid, God. You should have given me what you gave to somebody else. Now, God in his wisdom may well be, kind of like my illustration with the truck, saying, I am not going to give you everything, because if I gave you everything, you wouldn't ever interact with your neighbors. And the way to love your neighbor is actually to spend time with them, get to know their name, get to know what their interests are, and offer yourself in service to them, and vice versa. And now we can find ways that we can communicate, and you will live in the community that I originally intended you for. So no, I'm not going to give you everything, but I'm going to put you in a community where all the gifts are necessary. It's just kind of a challenge for you to get to go around and go, okay, we need this, and to learn people well enough to be able to put need A together with resource A, and the only way that happens is when we live in community and talk to each other. So one of the most important times when we gather is not worship. Don't get me wrong, worship is really important. Word and sacrament ministry, that's essential. But it's lobby time. Because lobby time is where you find out that so-and-so has got this resource, so-and-so has got that need, and we get to do the fun thing of saying, God in his wisdom placed us in community. Let me hook you up with this person because together you're going to have what you need. On Monday, I got diagnosed with celiac disease. Congratulations, welcome, to the world of no wheat. No wheat, no rye, and most importantly for me, no barley. And you know what that does to beer drinkers? Yes. And so I now have, and there's a liquor store in Boulder that has the beer I like and the best price in the area. So I was down doing some pastoral stuff, stopped by, picked up like 6 cases of beer, and then got a diagnosis of celiac disease. And I'm like, oh, crap. Luckily, my across the street neighbor, who has a pickup truck and does gardening for a living, loves beer. And so I was like, hey, Tammy, try one of these beers, see if you like it. And she was like, yeah, that's good beer. I said, I can hook you up. And so I think I'm going to get my leaves raked for free. We work together in community. The coveting commandment is where we say, God, I don't want community. I want everything for me. Okay? So years ago, I walked into a pastor's office, and he had on his desk like HTML for dummies. And I was like, what's up with the book? And I think, help me out, computer guys, that's how you build a website, was using HTML, or one of the ways you can do it. Yeah. And he was like, well, and this was back in the 90s, okay? And he was like, church needs a website, so, and I'm like, do you have anybody? Oh, yeah, I got people. Why aren't you talking to them? Well, it's going to come down to me in the end, and I'm like, it doesn't have to, What if you actually talk to the people in your congregation who can do something, and especially guys, guys don't like to sit around and talk, maybe the Gratitude would help, but what they like to do is do. And if you say, hey, I need a website and here's some content, you're going to get a website. So coveting fights community, and God says one of the ways we deal with that is by gratitude, rejoicing in what I have and rejoicing in what you have. So here's practical steps. Human beings, we compare. That's just what we do. We are not going to be able to take that out of our DNA. Now you can argue comparison didn't exist before the fall. It only happened after we listened to the serpent. Could be true, but it's part of who we are. That means we're always measuring, and it depends on what age of life you are. When you were a young kid, it was who was fastest on the playground, right? When you were a teenager, it was who could date the best looking girl, boy, whatever, however that worked, okay? We measure. Our team went to state. Yay, us! Okay, we measured, right? Social media has put this on steroids because people post their highlight reels, and the people who are looking at it are the people who are bored. And they're going, nothing is happening in my life. I will scroll through. And the next thing you know, you're going, all my friends are doing this. All they're doing this. And you're going, now you understand the reality check here, right? You're seeing their highlight reel while you're in a low place. And this is bad for mental health, okay? But comparison is what we do. And so we have to kind of tell young people, govern, guide, think through when you're using social media, because just because your friend posts this doesn't mean their life is like that 24/7. I know that, Pastor. Yeah, but it's one thing to know it, and it's another thing to say, you know what, this isn't healthy for me. You know. So practical signs of coveting is the comparison thing. It's just what we do. And then there's fatigue. That's the exhaustion of striving for the next thing because we see somebody else with the next thing and we say, I want it. And finally, there is the bitter root at the bottom of it, which is the resentment that comes because God has blessed somebody else or others are succeeding. I am at the stage in life, career-wise, where I now have classmates who are seminary professors. I now have classmates who are district presidents, okay? And I am okay with that for two reasons. One, God, I'd be bad at a seminary professor. And two, 80% of what comes across a district president's desk is there is trouble somewhere. And it is big enough trouble that I need you to come fix it. Yeah. And, man, I cannot think of a worse job. So I have contentment because I also understand God's call in my life was parish pastor.
You have enough troubles here.
Yeah. Mike Clark used to tell the story. He said, if we had a big circle in the sanctuary and we all wrote down our biggest trouble and we all threw it in the middle, right? And then you stood up, Pastor, and read a trouble and said, who wants this one? He said, at the end of it, we'd all go forward and take our own troubles back when we heard everybody else's troubles. Yep. So this can happen, though, because I do have classmates who are like, what have I done with my life? You know? Dave's a seminary professor. Well, good for Dave, you know? All I've done is, been a parish pastor. Thanks be to God. Actually, with them, I actually use a slightly different thing. I learned from my father, who was a fighter pilot in World War II, right? And so he had a particular, the guys on the base were absolutely essential to the mission, but they didn't get shot at. So he always, and particularly my uncle who was a Marine, he had a real disrespect for the rear echelon guys. And I'm like, you do realize in keeping the pointy end of the spear pointy, it's called the tooth to tail ratio, and it's about 1 to 10. So if you want 10 guys on the front line, you need 90 people in the armed forces to keep them on the front line, supplied and everything else. Okay? So you need the rear echelon. You can't just blow them off. But at the same time, they're not getting shot at, And I'm like, so long story long. So moving from the diagnosis, we covet, to the antidote. Coveting is always focused on what we don't have. Gratitude focuses on what we do have, hence the graticubes on your table. Gratitude helps us live in obedience to the 9th and 10th commandments, and gratitude is a spiritual discipline. It does not come naturally. Paul in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, rejoice always, pray continually, give thanks in all circumstances. This is God's will for you in Christ Jesus. So, this is God's will. This is what God wants us to do. Rejoice, pray, give thanks in all circumstances. Now, in all circumstances is not for all circumstances. Okay? It is okay to be discontent when you are in lousy circumstances. 50% of the Psalms are people in lousy circumstances being discontent. They are telling God, in God's own words, God, I hate it here. Why are my friends mad at me? I hate it here. Why are my enemies triumphing over me? Okay? They are singing the blues, not the praises. It is a good thing, however, to add thanksgiving for what we gain from passing through those lousy circumstances. So, for example, I don't have to be thankful that I have an illness. I can choose to be grateful for those who love me enough to care for me when I'm sick. Or like I illustrated with my mom, okay? My mom fell. She was by herself. She could barely push the button on her help I've fallen and I can't get up. She didn't have the strength. And I'll tell you a funny story on that one right now. Yes, I have enough time. So I was telling somebody this morning that, my mom was like, nobody's answering when I hit the help I've fallen and I can't get up button. And then she's trying to crawl across to the telephone, and it's not going well. And then she finally hits it one more time, and it works. And the voice comes on, and she's like, "Yes, what's your problem, Emma? Yes, I've fallen, I can't get up, and we'll call your son, we'll call your daughter, we'll call an ambulance and the whole 9 yards." I was like, good, I'm glad you figured that out. And this is one of the problems we're having when you're 101 and live by yourself, is you don't have the strength. Okay, so she now has a rule. She can no longer cook by herself. Some of the help that we have coming in cooks for her and prepares meals, and she can put them in the microwave, and she can cook. Okay, that's great. Now she's also having a problem with the little push button on the microwave, and my brother is saying, I can't fix that. That's just, you need to find a way to have that much strength, or you have to move someplace where they're going to bring you food. So she found the strength. She does not want to move. And we keep going, Mom, you're going to have 1,000 friends if you move to assisted living. We know you. You're going to know everybody. You've been in this town for 101 years. You know everybody. Anyhow, the funny story about pushing the little button. We had an old couple here when I arrived, Orv and Vi Taylor. And if some of you may remember Orv and Vi, they were a hoot. I loved Orv and Vi. I told you the story about having Orv and Vi come to middle school, to confirmation, when we were talking about the 6th commandment, and we were talking about love and marriage. Thou shalt not commit adultery. We positively love in marriage, right? And they had been married for 60 years at that time or something. And I did not think through the ramifications of Orv and Vi, and invited them and interviewed them about, how did you fall in love? And Orv basically said, Vi was ironing clothes working for my mom, and I liked the way her ass wiggled. And okay. I think the middle schoolers related. So the funny story is, Vi is wearing one of those, and they're living up at Good Samaritan in Loveland. And it goes off. And so the nurses run down the hall and break into Orv and Vi's room, only to find Orv on top of Vi. Whoops! I love that story. Yeah.
There was also a time when Vi called for help.
Yeah.
And the nurse says, well, I'll come in as soon as I get my paperwork done.
Yeah.
She reached over and called 911.
Yeah. They took care of business, Orv and Vi did. Yeah. So, gratitude is a learned behavior. Paul says in Philippians 4, I have learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. Key word, learned. I know what it is to be in need. I know what it is to have plenty. I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, living in plenty or in want. So, twice the word learned comes in. Learned starts with, I don't know how to do it, ends with, I know how to do it, because I have learned. How did Paul learn? Because sometimes I had enough, sometimes I didn't have enough, and I learned through that whole process, God was there with me when I had plenty, God was with me when I didn't have enough. Remember, one of the times Paul spent 24 hours hanging onto a piece of flotsam after a shipwreck. He had nothing, and God carried him through it. And he said, from those experiences, I have learned to be content. Contentment doesn't come easily for human beings. It is a learned behavior. It is a learned attitude. It is something we get to practice. Hence, you get to shake your thanks. What were these things called? Gratitudes. And you get to practice by saying, okay, I get to do something else. Because I've told you before, it's real easy to drop into the same three things. God, I thank you for my health, or maybe not today. Or I thank you for this, I thank you for that. And we can kind of get stuck. So I gave you a 12-sided cube so you could play with it and go, oh, I hadn't thought about giving thanks for that. That's a different circumstance. Now, this is my confirmation verse. I can do all things through him who gives me strength. You'll see it on inspirational posters everywhere. We had a kid in the congregation who ran well at cross country, made it to state a couple of times. And I knew a Christian runner named Meb Keflezighi, who was the best marathoner in America for a while. And he was also a devout believer. And so when he came up with a new book, I wrote and I said, hey, and he was offering, buy the book and I'll inscribe it to whoever you want it inscribed to. So I had him inscribe it to the kid in the congregation. And Meb's verse, his personal verse, is Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. He's a world-class marathoner. Woo! Anyhow, I chose it for the same reason. It was inspirational. However, a better, more grammatically correct way of translating it is, I can do all this, not all things, through him who strengthens me. What's the this? I've learned to be content. So it's not always about moving from victory to victory. Sometimes it's saying, I'm going to learn to be content. I can do this because of what God has done for me. He has given me strength. I was able to hang on to that piece of driftwood for 24 hours when I was out in the middle of the water. I don't have what I used to have. I don't have this. I don't have that. But this is not just anything. It is the power to be content in circumstances. It is a learned behavior. We're going to skip that one because I don't have time for that whole story. Here's our typical Thanksgiving gospel reading. And it's the story of the 10 lepers. 10 lepers come up to Jesus. Jesus heals them. And they go and show yourself. One of them, when he saw he was healed, came back, praising God in a loud voice. Threw himself at Jesus' feet, thanked him. And then he's a Samaritan, and Jesus says, how come the Samaritan? Where are the other 9? And then he tells the Samaritan, rise and go, your faith has made you well. So here's what gratitude does for us. It intentionally slows our lives. I'm going to bet all 10 lepers were pretty happy to be healed. I'm going to bet they went home and their families were happy. Yeah. But 9 of them probably went, oh my God, I have got time. I've got a bunch of things I need to make up. Yeah. I missed days earning. There's chores around the house. I've got things to do because now I have all my digits back. I can do and I can work. And they jumped immediately back into life. That's my read. I don't know if it's true, but that's the way I'm reading it. But one takes the time to express gratitude. He doesn't immediately move on to what's next. And by doing that, he slows and savors the moment. And I threw up a psychological term. He slows the hedonic treadmill. And this is kind of where you can have some fun if you're trying to do Christian witness with people who aren't interested in God. Is everybody acknowledges the hedonic treadmill. And it's broken down in behavioral psychology. There is desire, okay? Yep, I want something. I will strive to get it. Good capitalists. I will obtain it. I will enjoy it. But then I adapt to it, and then I start to desire more, and then my desire leads me around, and I'm like the rat on the wheel. We slow the wheel down by saying, I'm going to enjoy it. And one of the ways we enjoy it is by expressing gratitude for it. So the 10th guy enjoys his healing more than the other 9. My opinion, when I get to heaven, they may contradict me. But I think he says, oh yeah. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure by the time he got home, his wife said, well, thank God you're finally back and can hold a hammer. This place is falling down. I'm sure that's what happened. But this is, if you're looking for a way to talk with people about Jesus without using the word Jesus, the hedonic treadmill, everybody goes, oh yeah, that's true. And then you get to witness and say, yeah, that's part of the Christian practice of gratitude, is it slows me down and it slows the wheel down and I get to enjoy it more. You want to play with my gratitude? So practical steps. First off, figure out what triggers your coveting. Usually it's phrases like, I wish I had, or if only. And so first off, you can just limit your life in certain ways and avoid triggers. Or you can use that old trigger to establish a new habit. Instead of, I wish I had, give thanks for what you do have. Judy and I are about to engage in the second hardest thing that homeowners do. We are going to redo the master bathroom in our house.
Oh.
The only thing worse than that is the kitchen, okay? And we're not going to touch the kitchen right now. But we know we're going to try to age in place at this house. We bought a single story, and we said this would be smart to start to work on this now while we're both ambulatory. Judy's knee surgery, her knee replacement in January, led us to the conclusion we need a shower big enough for some place to sit down, okay? So we're about to do this, okay?
Right.
We are trying very hard, and Judy said, I'm not going to do that, the Pinterest thing of flipping through bathrooms and going, oh, don't want it, okay? I just want this, this, and this, okay? So we are thankful we have a house where we can age in place, as opposed to going, I wish I had this. And then finally, daily practice. Name 3 things for which you're grateful. And again, you can do the middle school boy thing of the same 3 things every day. I remember the story, Ed, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Judy Mormon used to tell the story. She would pick up her kids from school, and they'd be in the back of the van, right? And son and daughter. And she would ask, good parenting questions. Tell me something about your day. And her daughter would tell her something about the day, and it would go on and on and on. And then she'd ask her son, tell me something about your day. And it can't be recess and it can't be lunch. Curse, spoiled again. And she was and then Judy, being Judy, was like, we are not stopping this van until you give me something. And the sister would be like, please just give her something. I gotta pee. So we need practice. And again, take a Gratitude comb with you. Play with it. Try it. 12 different things. And don't get me wrong, there's plenty more out there. But it's meant to be a thought leader to say, oh, what can I do? And feel free, really. There it is. Yep. I had 6 of them because I knew I had 6 tables. One person loved it so much they were taking it home to use it at their Thanksgiving this weekend. So feel free, use it, play with it, but try not to repeat. And I find personally writing them down is far more effective than just telling God thank you in a prayer.
And the good thing about that, you can go back.
Mm-hmm.
And it just really works out.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. All right, folks, that's everything I got on how not to covet. Anybody else want to throw something in? I'm going to go up and get ready for second service.